Forget the comparisons. That's more about
Hey
political
everybody,
advantage than setting a realistic
it's
standard.
Atheist for
Be
the
honest.
Cause, and
Call it all out.
I'm doing some
Ask for the
election
same
coverage today
consequences for
with the
similar
town hall.
actions. Don't go light on your own and hard on others. That's one of the reasons why so many think so little of politicians, especially in D.C.
The town hall should be starting in a couple minutes here, so where Howard Schultz will be doing answering questions, basically. If you don't know what a town hall is, effectively the media just asks the a candidate multiple questions about their policies and you know, their campaign and what their goals are and things like that, and it prepares someone to be president, you know, and go through the whole campaign. So we'll see what happens. We should learn a lot about substance. This town hall is key because if Howard Schultz, who is seriously considering running, doesn't have a good town hall, it could kill his campaign. He really needs to get some traction here, so and it's not working. There we go. It wasn't working for some reason, but I got it now.
It is hard to see how
Sorry,
you
I'm just getting
ever
some
get
things set up here.
Of this country to agree to anything less, especially when election day comes. Thank you for watching. CNN's Town Hall with independent Howard Schultz starts right now. A big night going towards 2020. Stay with CNN.
There we go.
Good evening from Houston, Texas, and welcome to a CNN Town Hall on the 2020 presidential race with Howard Schultz. I'm Poppy Harlow. I am so happy to be with everyone tonight. An unexpected twist on the road to the White House. The former CEO of Starbucks says he is seriously considering an independent bid for the presidency. Mr. Schultz has already shaken up this race, sparking outrage from the left.
If the sound is too loud or not loud enough, let me know. I'll change it.
Mr. Schultz comes face to face with you, the voters, participating in his first ever live televised town hall.
But
he will take questions from across the
like I was saying, this is really key for Howard Schultz.
Of course, from independents. So let's get
if he doesn't do well here, it'll probably kill his campaign. So, and a lot of people don't even. It was about 50% of people have never heard of him. So
thank you very much. Thank you.
He's got like a 25% favorable rating.
Having us. Welcome.
Going off memory.
Welcome. All right. So we're going to talk about all the issues because that's what this is about. It's about the important issues that matter to Americans the most. But before we do that, a lot of Americans don't know you, and they don't know your story. So that's where I want to begin tonight. And to do that, I'd like to bring in Joy Sowore, who is an immigrant from Nigeria. She is now a graduate student in Rice University's Global Affairs program. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Schultz, you're coming into the 2020 presidential race not having any prior political experience, but solely as a successful businessman. That was what Donald Trump ran on as his advantage over other seasoned politicians who were his opponents. How do you differ from him in this regard? Do you think your good business sense qualifies you to do a better job than he? If yes, how so?
Oh, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Poppy, thank you. Thanks, CNN. And thank you all for being here. Thank you for the question. You know, I'm not coming into this thinking about comparing myself to Donald Trump. I think his record and what he has accomplished within the Oval Office speaks for itself. I'm here today and speaking publicly about thinking about running for president because of my concern for the American people and my love of the country. I think we could be doing so much better than we are. I think we look at the country today, it's very fragile, our standing in the world, and I think what's missing right now is a deep sense of leadership that the American people are longing for and deserve, a sense of character, a sense of morality, a level of civility. My business experience is not qualifications to run for president, but it is what I've learned along the way.
That's a
And
stupid
if you look at
thing to
Starbucks,
say.
what I've done in the last 36 years, unlike almost any other company in America, is we've provided comprehensive health insurance for every employee, ownership for every employee, free college tuition for every employee, and we did that because of trying to build a different kind of company of balancing profit with responsibility. And I think that is a model for trying to do things in America that has not been done before, and that is to create the kind of spirit and the kind of confidence that the American people are looking for in leaders that they do not have today.
So let's talk. It's a good
That's
question.
totally
Let's
the
talk a
wrong
little
way to
bit
go,
more
to
about
put
that,
everything up,
about
all
if
the
your
responsibility on the
experience to potentially be the next
business.
president of the United States is not your experience running Starbucks and building it. What is your qualification to be president?
He has none.
Well, I think my qualifications is my life experience. I grew up in public housing in Brooklyn, New York.
This is brutal so
In
far.
the projects. When I was 7 years old, my father came home from work, injured on the job, lost his health insurance, lost workman's compensation, and we were destitute as a family. I lived through the shame and understanding of what it means to be in fear of no health insurance and no money. I took that experience, and it provided me a lens of how I would see the world and how I would try and build my company. What we're really talking about today is the fact that the country has lost a sense of leadership in both parties, lost a sense of understanding about the values and the conscience of the country, and someone has to stand up and say, I'm going to be accountable, I'm going to look at the results of what we need to do, and we're going to accomplish things on the basis of what the American people need.
He's not establishing his own
On the
leadership.
far left and the far right are more interested in partisan politics, revenge politics, and not doing the people's business. The reason I'm here tonight and the reason I've stepped up is because I'm concerned about your children, my grandchildren, and the future of the country. I know we can do better than this.
So let's stay on that topic.
But
and let's
according
talk
to
a
you,
little bit
you're
more
no more qualified
about
than me to run for
your personal
president.
experience and what you lived through and what brought you here. With us now is independent voter Greg Amata. He is a video designer working on a production here in Houston. What's your question?
Mr. Schultz, you have touted your own Rags to Riches story as a reason for your potential run for president. Do you think your success is all because of hard work? Or are there any advantages that our current system gives people like you after achieving a certain level of wealth? What would you say to the millions of hardworking Americans that are not billionaires? What do you think is holding them back?
Well, thank you for the question. I mean, if anyone would have told me when I was 10 years old or 15 years old, living in public housing, that I would reach this level of success, I honestly would never have believed it. Not possible. But why was it possible? It's possible because it could only happen in America. Now, when I look at the country today, and I look at
I hope he doesn't go back to his family story
of the
every
American
question.
families don't have $400 in case of a crisis. What it says to me is that the prospects of that level of success that I enjoyed is not as accessible to them as it was to me.
I find that completely unacceptable. And it's unacceptable because the government and Washington is not providing a level of humanity, responsibility, and understanding about the compassion and the empathy necessary to make sure that everyone in America has a chance at that dream. I mean, I'll just ask you a question of all of you. Does anyone in this audience think that the United States government is doing well for you and your family or for the country and the American people? Raise your hand if you think the government is doing well for you.
Not a single hand.
So no one in this audience, just think about this, no one in the entire audience thinks the government is doing well. That is why I'm here. And I got good news for you. We can fix it. We can fix it.
I do like the message of optimism.
But we can't fix it under a broken system where the far left and the far right are more engaged every single day in more interested in self-preservation, self-interest, and not representing you.
So on that point, Mr. Schultz, you say it's not your business experience at Starbucks that has qualified you for this fully. A lot of it is your personal experience, your childhood.
Yeah.
For everyone who doesn't know, not only did you grow up in poverty and in public housing, you were abused. You were assaulted by your father. And there is a moment that you write about that was formative at 15 years old. What happened and how did it change the trajectory of your life?
In the book that I've just released, for the first time in my life, I have revealed very personal stories that I thought
this is coming off as a book tour
for people to know about me, and also potentially give other people perhaps the courage or the conviction to tell their story. I grew up with a father that was in a very tough situation. He had no purpose in life. He didn't make any money. He was a World War II veteran and unfortunately never found his way. And he was a bitter man. And as a result of that, there were moments of rage and abuse. It didn't define me. I didn't hate my father, but it did provide me with a level of vulnerability, insecurity, and scars that I still have today. And that's perhaps why I have such a high degree of sensitivity about so many people in America who are being left behind. I just think it's unconscionable to live in a country where so many Americans believe that the promise of the country is no longer available to them. And so everything I've done in the last
and no
number
policy
of years
issues
is
so
literally
far.
trying to make my parents proud. Unfortunately, they did not get a chance to see my success.
And the worst thing
But
he
what
could
I want
have
to
said
do is restore
to the
the
first
faith
question
in the
was
country
that being
and restore our
a
values
businessman
and our
doesn't
sense of
qualify
humanity
him.
with one another. That's what I want to do.
So let's get to some of the key issues on the minds of the voters with us now. Let's turn to some of the issues that you would confront if you decide to run for president, if you become president. As you know, President Trump was here last night, rally in El Paso, Texas, calling for money for the border wall. He thinks that's the solution to fight illegal immigration. Let's bring in Republican voter Victor Manjarrez. He served more than 20 years in U.S. Border Patrol. Victor, what's your question tonight?
Mr. Schultz, my question is, our country has long welcomed migrants into the United States as long as they've entered in a manner that we have deemed acceptable. The estimated 12.5 million people residing in the United States without appropriate immigration documents has not been addressed. My experience as a Border Patrol Chief Patrol Agent tells me it's not practical to round up everyone. What would your policy approach be to addressing this group of individuals?
Finally, some policy. Thanks for the question.
I really appreciate the question because I have spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I've actually traveled to McAllen, Texas to see what was going on at the border. The question about immigration today, for me, is not a question about the wall. It's not a question about ICE. It's not even a question about the Dreamers and the 11 to 12 million people who are here unauthorized. It's a question about humanity. Now, this is a perfect example of why I'm here tonight.
I don't think humanity is a good enough
The vast majority of American people, and I'm talking about 75% or so, have been longing for, asking, and demanding an immigration bill that is sensible and that we pass. The Republicans on the far right want to do everything they can, which I agree with, in terms of securing the borders. That's the right thing to do. The Democrats want to abolish ICE, more or less. The Republicans have put people, children, in cages and stripped mothers from babies. That is not humane. The dreamers, in my view, in terms of the humanity of the country, should be allowed a pathway to citizenship. And the 11 million to 12 million unauthorized people who are here should get in line in a fair way, pay their back taxes, pay a fee, and bring them in. But the question of humanity is this. Everyone in this room, 95% of all of us here, are here because of our ancestors have come here as immigrants. We are a country of immigrants. The United States of America should not be building walls.
I think this is a good, reasonable
We should be building bridges
policy.
that allow people in. It is the foundation of our society. But we also should do everything we can at the border to secure the borders with the best technology available, which we have in this country, and not allow bad people in. But the politics on both sides, the far right and the far left, have used this as a weapon to politicize the situation, when the vast majority of all of Americans want an immigration bill that is sensible. This can be fixed, but not with a broken system where the extreme left and the extreme right will not give the people what they want. And
well,
that is
how are
again
you going
why
to
I'm
change
here
the
tonight
system?
And believe so strongly that the system is so broken.
Becoming president
Let's get to our
doesn't
next
change the
question
system.
on another key issue that can be very divisive in terms of how you tackle it, and that's climate change. We have an issue. We have a voter here who's with us, Joel Phillips, a student at the University of Houston, a Democrat. Your question tonight.
Hello. So my question is, as a lifelong Houstonian, I've seen the damages that hurricanes have caused to my city, and I watched as Harvey continued in a devastating way, that damage. So in the face of a warming climate that leads to more powerful storms, how much of a priority would climate change be to your administration, and what are some plans you have to tackle that issue?
Thank you for the question. I think the concern that you have, I share at the highest level. I came here to Houston during Hurricane Harvey. I went to New Orleans during Katrina, and I've seen for myself what is happening in this country and around the world.
One hurricane
But let's maybe bring up the topic of the day, which is the Green New Deal. I read with great interest what they were suggesting. And I think these are well-intentioned people, and like me, are gravely concerned about our planet, climate change, and the things that we have to do. So the first answer to the question is this would be a top priority. But we have to be sensible about it. So here we are in Texas, where oil and gas is a primary product of this entire state. But yet you lead the nation in wind energy. So it's not an either-or situation. We can do both.
That's
when I read
Trump's
the
policy.
proposed bill in terms of the Green New Deal, and I read that by 2030, they're suggesting that every building in America becomes clean energy, conforms to clean energy. Just to put that in perspective, because it's not realistic, that would mean that between 2,000 and 3,000 buildings a day would have to be reconstructed to conform to what they're saying. So let's be sensible about what we're suggesting.
She tried to cut him
Let's
off.
not just throw stuff against a wall because it's a good slogan or we get a press release. Let's be truthful. And if there's one thing that I'm trying
CNN
to do
does
tonight,
not like this
more than
message.
anything else, is tell you what I believe, tell you what I believe is true, and speak to you from my heart for someone who loves the country, who has benefited tremendously from the promise of the country, and wants to see that continue.
He didn't actually
but
say
when I
his
see
policy, though.
Politicians start throwing things out that I know is not realistic, that is not being honest with the American people.
Mr. Schultz, on the Green New Deal, it includes a federal jobs guarantee.
Yeah.
Are you supportive of that? And you mentioned Democrats throwing up slogans.
Are you supportive of killing all the cows?
Support the Green New Deal.
Eliminating air
It's
travel.
proposed by Senator Markey and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Do you think that they are being disingenuous with the American people?
Absolutely.
When I read the Green New Deal, and I try and understand.
I'm not a
what they're
climate
suggesting,
change skeptic, by the way.
I don't understand how you're going to give a job for everybody, how you're going to give free college to everybody, how you're going to create clean energy throughout the country in every building of the land, and then tally this thing up with $32 trillion on Medicare for all. That's about $40 trillion plus. We are sitting, ladies and gentlemen, with $22 trillion of debt on the balance sheet of America. So once again, not that I'm a business person or I'm an economist, and maybe an economist would disagree with me, but I think it's not it's immoral to suggest that we can tally up 20, 30, 40, $50 trillion of debt to solve a problem that could be solved in a different way. It's not that they're disingenuous. I think they're well-intentioned. This is not personal. I just don't agree this is the right way to approach things.
So let's get to another key question with us.
He needs to tell us what his plan is,
a matter of months ago, a lifelong Democrat. You've contributed mostly to Democratic candidates, but the party, you've said, has moved too far left for you. So let's go to a Democratic voter who has a question for you, Marika McCool. Good evening.
Hi. Hello. So you openly opposed Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's proposal to raise the marginal tax rate to 70% on incomes over $10 million. So if you're elected president and being a member of the group of people who earn over $10 million, what would your proposed tax plan be?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to try and explain this to you in a very personal way. First off, I should be paying more taxes. And people who are in the bracket of making millions of dollars, or whatever the number might be, should be paying more taxes. But we have to go back a year or so. I was very vocally against President Trump's corporate tax rate of lowering the corporate tax rate from 35% to 21%. I was against it because corporations should not have been given that sweet deal without any incentive to do anything for their employees or the communities they serve.
I think a lot of Trump supporters agree with that.
Training, whatever. There was a tremendous opportunity for the United States to have comprehensive tax reform. And that would have meant higher rates on individuals like myself. Corporate tax rate of 21% should have never happened. And we should have examined how can we create comprehensive tax reform so that we could lower the taxes for the middle class. But the headline is here, I should be paying more taxes, and people who make this kind of revenue and of means should pay more taxes.
So on that point, you've just said twice, I should pay more taxes. And America's question, important question, was about personal income tax. How much should the wealthy pay in this country? You're a billionaire. Give me a sense. Are you talking about you should pay 2% higher, 10% higher, 20% higher federal income tax?
Poppy, I don't know what the number is. I think what I'm saying is we need comprehensive tax reform.
That comes off as unfair.
It makes a difference. Would it go up to, the rate under President Clinton, or are we talking about significantly higher?
What I think is what being proposed at 70% is a punitive number. And I think there are better ways to do this.
So what's not punitive?
I don't know what the number is, but what I'm suggesting is I should be paying higher taxes. And I think people across the country are willing to pay higher taxes. But there's a caveat there. And the caveat is this.
But is it higher than 2% more, for example?
I think it is. But let me just qualify this. That's very important. If you look at the American people and you ask them this following question, do you trust the government? Do you trust Congress? Most people in America say, I've lost trust and confidence in Congress and certainly in the president. And so when you ask people to pay more taxes, we have to make sure that there is a agreement that your additional tax dollars are going to be spent wisely by the government. And that goes back to the gentleman's question about whether or not we're going to spend 20 or 30 or 40 trillion dollars on a Green New Deal that we can't afford. There are other ways to do it. And so I think this is a very important point. We need comprehensive tax reform in the United States, where the people who are making more are paying more taxes. We're lowering the tax for middle-class Americans, and we're doing it in a comprehensive way. In addition to that, there should be infrastructure development. And one of the things I've learned this year, which really surprises me, is that about 20–30% of people who live in rural America do not have broadband access. FDR,
I've been talking about that for years,
made it a right for every American to have electricity. It should be a right for every American family to have broadband access. So we're living in a digital age. We can't leave the American people behind.
That we are. Although I could get off Twitter from now and then from time to time. You said
That's a really
on
good
60
point.
Minutes,
It's
Mr.
not talked
Schultz,
about
that
enough.
you would release your tax returns today. Will you commit to releasing your tax returns this week?
Well, I'm not yet decided to run for president, but if I decide to run for president, I 100% will release my taxes and be completely transparent.
And here's why I ask, because I remember, we all remember May 2014, when now President Trump was mulling a bid for the White House, and he said exactly the same thing.
Yeah, but I think President Trump, unfortunately, has a habit of not being truthful. And I think I raise my hand to all of you, and I can promise you, not only will I pay my taxes, not only will I release my tax refund.
Well, there you go. He'll pay his taxes.
But I want to say something else. What is lacking right now in the country when we can't get an immigration bill, when we've got a level of debt that we have, where we've got a failing education system, a healthcare system that is a crisis, and millions of Americans that no longer have access to the prospects of the American dream. All of this is about one thing, and that is no one has stood up and said, I am going to be accountable for the results. If I run for president, I raise my hand and I'm saying, I am accountable to solve these problems. And if we look at all of these issues that I've just gone through, and we can go through them again, the debt, the healthcare issue.
He has not offered any solutions.
Education,
he's only identifying problems.
All of the issues, immigration, this is not new. This has been with us for years.
And we want we want to get to
like
so
how
many
will you
issues.
determine the correct tax rate for the rich people? For over $10 million, will you have that category or what? He won't even mention his strategy. So I'm gonna turn down a level for now, but he's got to at least come up with some sort of answer that gives us some sort of idea how he's gonna go through and determine a tax rate or something. You know, it'd be nice if he could say, you know, maybe he'll pay like 30% taxes or whatever the tax rate is. Just give a ballpark figure. But when he won't even, when he won't do that, then give us like some sort of system for determining that. But he's not even giving us that. Okay, you think you should pay more taxes, but you have no idea what that rate should be, and you have no idea how to determine that rate. And oh, by the way, you're a businessman, which your business experience doesn't qualify you to be president. You just have some family experience that everybody else has, so I guess everybody's qualified to run for president. His centrist message, a lot of what he's saying is reasonable, but it's like it's just attacking, and there's no real answers of, you know, how he'll go about his own proposals.
We are live to you tonight from Houston at the Hobby Center for the Performing Arts. Welcome back, everyone. So, Mr. Schultz, the question that we received the most of by far ahead of this town hall was about your potential impact on the 2020 race. So on that topic, let me bring in Democrat Alex Lammers from Rice.
What? Technical difficulties. Guess I'll
Are true.
Sorry, guys.
But if you choose to run in 2020, you will have to convince millions of Americans that a vote for you is not a vote for Donald Trump. Why is this the time, with considerable risk of contributing to his reelection, to try something new?
Thank you, Alex. Let's go back to the question I asked.
A lot of these questions are planted. They're not even American, typical Americans. They're from organizations.
Things are going well, and the U.S. government is representing this audience and the American people well. And there wasn't one hand that goes up. I think that is primary evidence that the majority of Americans who are not on the extreme left and the extreme right feel as if they are not being represented and that we are losing something. We all know something's not quite right. And so when I look at the situation, I have a strong belief that it's time to disrupt the two-party system that is broken, that is based on revenge politics, And now people have asked me, how could you win? And I think this is a very important point. I know probably wants to get to the
Obama
next
and
question,
Trump were both
is that
disruptions
in the
of
last
the two-party system.
almost 30 years, every presidential election
That was the intention.
basically came down to 8 to 10 battleground states. But can you imagine a situation, if I run for president, we will be on the ballot of every state, and then the majority of every state, almost 50 states, a couple of them will...
God damn it. I think this is CNN's problem, not mine. I'll just have to reload it again, and we shouldn't lose anything. I can rewind it.
Majority of Americans feel like I do, the far right, vice versa. But in a three-person race in almost 50 states, for the first time in over 30 years, American people have a voice, and their vote really counts. And I'm here not saying I'm against the Democratic Party. I'm here saying I no longer recognize how far left they've gone. I just don't see myself in the party. And I believe
historically there have been times where there's been three legit parties.
Does not represent them, and they're looking for a home. I also think millions of Republicans who do not want to pull the lever for Donald Trump, if they have a better choice versus a far left Democrat, will come my way.
He's running as a personality, though, not as a. He's not running as a. As like a party.
Part of the race.
Okay, a very important question. So let's clarify this right now.
I can't turn the resolution down to try to take some of their bandwidth off, so that's part of the problem. But I think they just have too many people watching right now. And,
don't add up. I will not run for president because I will not do anything whatsoever to re-elect Donald Trump. But no one wants to see him fired more than me.
Mr. Schultz, the fall of 2020 is what I was asking about. If you do run and the numbers don't add up your way, and it looks like it would mean a second term for the president, would you commit to dropping out?
What I've just said is I am not going to run for president if it looks in any way, shape, or form.
But you know, look at 2016, things change.
Yeah, well, they do change. But at this point right now, I'm asking a different question. And that is, it's a lot less about me than giving the American people a voice that they don't have. And what better expression
just say
of
at
democracy
the we'll figure it out
than
when
giving
the time
the American
comes.
people a better choice, a new choice. There's nothing in the Constitution, not one word, that says anything about parties. So why can't I raise my voice and say I'm deeply concerned about where we are as a country, I'm deeply concerned about our standing in the world, which we have not gotten into, and I want to restore a set of values and dignity back into the Oval Office, and I want to see the American people once again feel as if America is a place for everyone, regardless of your station in life, the color of your skin, your sexual orientation, your gender, that everyone has an opportunity in America, and give the power of our government back to the American people. So, that is why I'm here.
Alex, you're still with us? Did Mr. Schultz answer your question?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so let's move on to the next
Thank
question.
God.
Thank you for that, Alex.
Don't want that
With us now is Independent Stephen Preston, a retired U.S. Army officer. Thank you for your service to all of us. What's your question?
Sir, on 60 Minutes, you stated, and I'm quoting, "Is it in our national interest to have a fight with Mexico, Canada, the EU, China, NATO?" You asked, "These are our friends, these are our allies. We're much better as a country being part of the world order." My question is, in light of their human and labor rights record, ethnic crackdowns, unfair trade practices, and militarism in the South China Sea, are the Chinese our allies and our friends?
So when I made that statement at 60 Minutes, I incorrectly included China in the sentence about allies. I don't believe China is our ally, but I also do not believe China is our enemy. What I do
That's a
believe
pretty
is
big
that China
mistake.
is a fierce competitor of the United States. I also think there are areas that are in our national interest to cooperate with China. We need China's cooperation to help solve the problem of North Korea. We also need China's cooperation specifically with lots of other nations with regard to doing everything we can to solve the climate change issue. What's involved right now, though, in terms of the trade and the tariff war that President Trump has started, which I think is such a strategic mistake, is three things have happened. One is that this trade and tariff war has resulted on a tax on U.S. consumers on lots of goods and services. That's one. Second, every farmer, everyone within the agricultural industry, everyone in the steel industry has lost markets that will not come back for years. And the third thing, and most important, is that we have damaged, at the highest possible level, an important diplomatic relationship with China, as China is building something very, very important that has not been discussed a great deal about.
So are we just supposed to let them cheat?
Which is a super, think about it as a super infrastructure development. And they are investing billions of dollars. That one effort, and then them taking the long view, is going to give them an economic advantage in the most important future region of the world, the entire Asia-Pac region. And you know where we are? We're absent. We're not there. We're not talking to them about that. We're not participating. We're not a partner in TPP. We're not doing anything. We've removed ourselves. So what I said on 60 Minutes, which I repeat, is that this president, in less than 2 years, has fractured most relationships with not only every government, but every head of state. For what purpose? To what end? We have always been a country that has supported our allies. We've always been a country that has built trust.
Yeah, and then they don't support us back. They don't pay their fair share in NATO.
Leadership. The world needs America's values, and we have removed ourselves. If I run for president, one of the first things I would do is I would visit every world leader that this president has damaged in terms of our relationship and restore the trust and confidence in America.
Oh God,
we need
apology tour.
To go forward to establish America's leadership economically and in the world order today.
So let's talk about China a little bit more, if we could here, because you've been many times.
Yes.
And I believe Starbucks is opening a new store in China every 15 hours. You own personally more than 33 million shares in Starbucks stock, which closed at a record high yesterday. That's over $2 billion worth. And you've said that the exposure of Starbucks in China will be greater than in the United States pretty soon. If you become president, how is Starbucks' considerable reliance on China not a conflict of interest for you?
A very important question. First off, in the last 20 years, Starbucks has built almost 4,000 stores in China and done it in a very successful way by partnering with the Chinese government, by demonstrating to them American values. As an example, not only have we given health care to our employees in the U.S., we actually gave critical health care to the parents of our employees in China. The first company, not only Chinese company, first company ever to do anything like that, demonstrating America's values and the humanity of our company. What I've said publicly is that if I run for president, there will be no conflict of interest of anything that has to do with Starbucks, and certainly with regard to China.
So
I'm running, if I run for president, I'm running not as an independent, I'm running as an American, wrapping myself in the American flag.
Yeah, he's got shares in
My first order of
Starbucks,
business
but
is to put the American people
I don't see it as too big of a conflict of
everything
interest.
I do, and there will be no conflict of interest in anything I have to do legally to separate myself from my financial interest with regard to China will be completely done. I am not Donald Trump.
Yeah, he's not a real estate guy.
Yeah.
April Henshaw, a Democratic voter, has a question for us.
Hi. Basically, it's a little history lesson on Jimmy Carter. He set a great example by disclosing and surrendering his investments and business interests that might influence his legislative priorities, like his beloved peanut farm.
Yeah.
Trump has changed this precedent. Would you follow Carter or Trump's lead?
I think that's the easiest question of the night. That is a question I don't even have to think about. The only thing that I would follow Donald Trump to do is when he made the statement before the government shut down that the buck stops with him. Remember he said that? And then 2 or 3 weeks later, he said, this is not my responsibility. The answer to the question is, President Carter had a great deal of integrity, a set of values. I would do everything I could to follow his lead with regard to transparency.
If you run for president, if you become president, Mr. Schultz, will you sell all of your shares in Starbucks?
Oh
well,
my
I
God.
think we're getting way premature. This is my
I doubt
third
it. He
week
shouldn't have to.
since
I think
60 Minutes.
I think people laugh, but
Yeah.
you're seriously considering
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
You have a huge stake, over
Yeah.
$2 billion in Starbucks. The biggest market for Starbucks will soon be China.
Yeah.
And we have seen what has happened in this presidency.
Yeah. I think the best way to say that is that I will do nothing whatsoever to have any conflict of interest between my investments overall or my interest in the company that I love, because I will put the role and responsibility and the accountability for results first if I run for president and I'm fortunate
So
enough to
that
win.
basically is a
And
no,
that is
he's
a
not going to
promise
sell
I
all
make
the
to the American
shares.
people.
And he shouldn't have to.
Have you not decided if you would sell all of
Like,
your
why?
shares?
That just benefits career politicians.
I don't think that's the question. I think there's multiple ways to do this. No,
Businessmen should be
evading the
allowed to
question.
run
It's,
without
there's
freaking
multiple
costing
ways to do this,
themselves
to set up a blind trust,
millions and
to do
millions,
lots of
hundreds of
things
millions of
to
dollars.
remove any conflict of interest.
Let's get,
Go ahead.
let's get to our next question. It's an important one. It comes from a veteran, Nicole Baldwin. She's a U.S. Army combat veteran who served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Thank you for that.
No problem. Hi. As a veteran, I have been very disappointed and displeased by both the professionalism and services of the VA healthcare system. We have many outdated hospitals run by non-veteran medical and mental health providers. What are your solutions for modernizing the healthcare system?
A lot of veterans are getting killed in the VA.
And giving veterans the opportunity to receive advanced medical and mental health care and state-of-the-art facilities that our veterans most desperately need and deserve.
Thank you. With great humility, thank you for all you've done for the country, for you and your family's sacrifice and commitment to the United States of America. Thank you. I have spent a great deal of time over the last few years engaged in learning as much as possible.
We should get rid of
about
the VA.
military,
That's what we
their
should
role
do.
in the world, and the responsibility that the VA has. Just as a side note, Starbucks Coffee Company has hired almost 20,000 veterans and or spouses. We have built 50 Starbucks stores adjacent to military bases. And my wife and I have created an opportunity for 18 transitional training services on military bases. Just quick story, we were in a meeting and someone who was transitioning out said something I will never forget. And he said, I have more anxiety about going on a job interview than I do going back to Afghanistan. And when I heard that, I knew that we had to do something to solve this problem. So over 1 million extraordinary young men and women like yourself who have worn the cloth of the nation have come home and have had a tough time with transition. Specifically the VA. When I'm going to give you a number you're not going to believe. Does anyone in the audience know what the annual budget is for the VA? You will be shocked. The annual budget for the VA is $200 billion. $200 billion.
That's a lot of money.
And I asked you a question earlier about the United States government and the left and the right. Is there any more evidence that we need as a country that we are not the solemn promise to take care of our veterans when they take off the cloth of the nation? And we have a $200 billion agency that is not serving the men and women properly. Now, there are good people in the VA, but there is a level of bureaucracy that is just unbelievable.
They need to be
and
able
now we want to turn
to
over
go to
the
hospitals.
entire healthcare industry to the U.S. government.
Not VA
Let's
specific
be
where they
real
have to go
about certain things.
hundreds of
The
miles
U.S. government
sometimes.
does some great things,
and
but
we're
the
gonna-
VA isn't one of them. And let me just say, if I run for president and I'm fortunate enough to be elected president, I raise my hand right now and I tell you all, I am a business person that is results oriented. I've run a public company for 26 years. I raise my hand and I say, I will fix the VA and I will be personally accountable if I run for president and I'm fortunate enough to win. No one in decades has fixed the VA with an annual budget of $200 billion. It is criminal.
Mr. Schultz, you have diagnosed a problem. It's a problem we all know exists, and it's a tragedy and a travesty. What would you do to fix it?
Okay, what I would do to fix it, first off, is diagnose the problem. And diagnosing the problem is that we have layers and layers and layers of government bureaucracy. No one knows who's in charge. There's no transparency of records. Veterans are waiting weeks and months for prescription drugs. There's all kinds of problems. You have to put the quality people in charge with accountability to the president.
Everybody else has said the same
President of the
thing.
United
Nobody
States
fixes
is not
it.
concerned about the VA. That is not what he's worried about. He talks a great deal about his support of veterans, but doesn't do much other than when the cameras are on. I will fix the VA because it's about leadership, it's about character, and it's also about the temperament of humility to listen to people who are smarter than you, who have more experience than you, to help solve this problem. So it's really about leadership, it's about character, and it's about results and accountability. I will be accountable, and if I run for president, I promise you, I will fix the VA.
It's a horrible
Nicole,
answer.
thank you
It's
for
a
your question.
bullshit
Thank you
with
for your
no
service.
details.
We have many more important
I
questions
mean,
straight ahead.
when's the
We will
last
be
time you
right
listened
back
to a
with more
candidate
from
that
CNN's
didn't say that?
live town hall here in Houston with Howard Schultz. Stay with us.
And I mean, Obama, you know, said all the same things, and I'd say he had the military's best interest in mind. Did he fix it? No. Then Trump said a lot of the same things. I think at one point he said he wanted to get rid of the VA and let them go to the hospitals, or at least give them the opportunity to go to hospitals before the VA. And did Donald Trump make a ton of changes? He made some changes, but he hasn't fixed the VA by any means. I mean, just stating the problem and saying you'll listen to people smarter than you. I mean, you're not even saying, okay, who's smarter than you? You know what I mean? So, I'm really not impressed with his VA answer. Just let these people go to the hospital. And he didn't even address the problem where there's so few VA hospitals that sometimes they have to go hundreds of miles to get to the only VA in the state or whatever it is, and then they get there, and like in my state there was actually a veteran killed by being overprescribed opioids, and that was after, you know, there was a whistleblower prior to that was ignored, and so there's a lot of problems. You're not going to go in like a businessman and solve all the issues. By the way, did I mention I hate CNN Go. For these big events, they have no they don't have the bandwidth or whatever to handle everybody that's on. That's only a commercial. I'm gonna be doing a video soon about Andrew Yang. I think I might do the next video on, because he was on Joe Rogan's podcast and that was interesting. He's a businessman, but he doesn't really have a shot to win. But February 3rd is the Iowa caucus, and so this is where the primaries start. And basically, if by Super Tuesday you haven't caught on March 3rd, then you're not catching on, and you really need to start getting traction in February, so that on Super Tuesday you can have a big day. So those are some dates for you. I really like Tulsi Gabbard and Amy Klobuchar. I think right now Amy Klobuchar is the best candidate. She's a centrist candidate that has a lot of detailed policies, and she's not the most charismatic, but she's charismatic enough. She got Brett Kavanaugh to go off you know, angrily at her when she asked him if he ever drank to the point of not remembering things. And so I think there are some good Democratic candidates, but though, you know, Kamala Harris is in the lead, I don't think she's a great candidate. You know, she's a prosecutor, doesn't have a, you know, she's already been lying about listening to, in college, to rappers that weren't even rapping at the time she was in college. Or at least they weren't producing records and stuff, so. Hopefully Amy Klobuchar can catch on, or Tulsi Gabbard, who's a progressive.
Talk about something in your career leading Starbucks that you call a blow to our soul. And that is the racial profiling and the arrest of 2 black men recently at a Philadelphia Starbucks. So on that point, Democratic voter Orgina Kinnear owns the Caffeine Coffee Cafe here in Houston. Yes. And you have a question on this issue.
Yes, hello, how are you?
Thank you.
Last year, an acute situation developed at Starbucks store in Pennsylvania. Our nation was divided, and thoughts of racial profiling soared. An unconscious bias training session was implemented, and many moved on. Do you believe the training was effective? And do you anticipate the voters taking their thoughts about this incident to the polls?
I thank you so much for this question, because I think of all the things we can talk about tonight, injustice in America of any kind, especially racial injustice, which continues, is not something that we should be proud of and we need to resolve. The situation in Philadelphia that occurred, I don't know how many people know the exact story, and I'll try and be brief. 2 African-American gentlemen walked into the store. They asked to use the bathroom. They were asked to buy something. They didn't. Something happened verbally between them and the manager. The manager decided to call 911. The men were arrested, handcuffed. Thank God they didn't resist, and they were put in jail. And it created a tremendous problem for the company. We immediately went to Philadelphia. We met with the 2 gentlemen. We met with clergy. We met with the DA. But most importantly, we realized that we had a problem. And it's a problem that I think exists widely in this country. And it's something that I would characterize as unconscious bias that many of us have based on our own life experience. And as a result of that, we decided that we should close every store at Starbucks at great expense, not for a PR stunt, not for marketing, but to train 180,000 people. And then we got experts who could help us do it. Cheryl Eiffel from NAACP, Brian Stevenson, Common, Melody Hobson, a whole host of people who could help us with the curriculum. It was 4 hours of training, which is not something that's going to change people's view. And now we're training everyone that comes into Starbucks, because we hire almost 50,000 new people a year. The training is ongoing. The training is deeply a courageous act, because we're doing something that we've realized we fell short on, and we're admitting the fact that we have to get better at this. And I think this is in many ways a proxy for the country. We have to be able to have uncomfortable conversations.
What did the Starbucks employee do
who are
wrong
different than ourselves
in this situation?
We have to embrace the diversity of the nation. Starbucks is a diverse organization, and we want to do everything we can. It was a terrible moment for the company. It's not something that we're going to forget, and it's something that we learned a great deal from, and we're still learning it about.
It's normal to ask
as somebody who
customers
grew up in a
to
very
buy
diverse
something
background as a young boy in the
if they're going to
projects,
stay there.
I didn't see color as a young boy, and I honestly don't see color now. And I want to do everything I can in terms of the character and the dignity of what it means to be the President of the United States. Is if I should run and be elected, that the Oval Office represents so much about the character
Black people
of the
tend
nation,
to get
the
offended when
morality
you
of the
say
nation. And
they
we
don't,
all know
you
that
don't
we've
see
seen
color.
things in the last 2 years that embarrass
Because that's a
us,
privilege.
not only at home but around the world. And we need to do everything to restore the humanity of the country. And the President of the United States has a large role to play in that, because he sets the agenda on the morality of the nation.
I feel like there's a lot
Regina,
we didn't get in that story. Like, did they resist?
All right, so let's move on to healthcare.
Or did they threaten? Or did they have
Brielle
priors?
Corvetti, she's a medical student at Baylor College of Medicine. What's your question tonight?
Hello, so I'm wondering, what is your view on Medicare for all? More specifically, what is your plan to improve our healthcare system?
Again, thank you for the question, and I think this gives me another opportunity to talk about the extreme left and the extreme right.
Amy Klobuchar is against Medicare
we have a
for all.
healthcare crisis in the country on many levels,
too expensive.
not the least of which is the opioid crisis. But
not good
the
enough.
Republicans, for 10 years, 8 years during the Obama presidency and the last 2 years, have done everything possible to eradicate the Affordable Care Act. And they've done that without offering any plan. This is the far right. The far left is now suggesting Medicare for all. That is a $32 trillion number. And just like the issue I brought up before about making all the buildings in America energy free in terms of clean energy, does anyone here really understand that Medicare for all also means that you will lose the choice of your doctor and your private insurance company? Not many people know that. So that would disrupt the entire system, and it'll cost $32 trillion.
So, Mr. Schultz, to that question, and because your question, Brielle, was about what's your plan, and many, I think, wonder, is it fair to criticize the left and the right? What is your plan to make sure that if it's not Medicare for all, what is your plan to make sure that every American can get
great follow-up question,
affordable health care?
First and foremost, 3 principles. One, I think everyone in America, every person deserves to have the right for affordable care. Every person. Second, there needs to be competition in the system. And what I mean by that is competition so that the American people can get access to prescription drugs at lower prices, because right now the government is not allowed under a federal law to negotiate with pharma. The third thing is that it has been tested but not proven yet about interstate commerce among insurance companies. But there's no doubt that, once again, the healthcare crisis has been with us for a long time. The other issue is I stand by the fact that I supported the Affordable Care Act. It covered 20 million people who did not have good insurance, but premiums have gone up double since the Affordable Care Act. So now we got to go back in and fix the Affordable Care Act and bring premiums down. Competition will do that. But the far right, remove the...
How? The question is how.
Yeah.
I don't mean to startle you from the back.
No.
The voice over your shoulder over here. But how specifically? Because I think so
well,
many
he was
people
kind of
here
getting to
hear
that.
Yeah.
But they say that is what Congress has been trying to do or talking about doing
You're wrong.
for so long.
Respectfully, it's not what Congress has been trying to do. What Congress has tried to do is, on the far right, eradicate the Affordable Care Act, and now on the far left, bring up Medicare for all, while prices have gone up. I mean, people are paying $300 for a vial for insulin that 10 years ago cost like less than $100, and the cost of it hasn't gone up. So this, you're gonna
But lowering the price of prescription drugs doesn't solve the whole problem.
It doesn't solve the whole problem, but do we understand the fact that the prescription drugs, again, I don't know how many people understand this.
That's like the majority of the problem.
Are priced at let's price X, because we cannot negotiate with the drug companies. Those same drugs that are manufactured here are available in other countries at a lower price, because the drug companies and the insurance companies are spending $400 to $500 million a year in lobbying efforts in which both parties are complicit to maintain the status quo.
We have many more issues to talk about. I just want to get to those voters' questions on these issues, so we're going to take a quick break. We will be right back, live from Houston, CNN's Town Hall with Howard Schultz. Continue to stay with us.
Well, he never really did get into the details. Healthcare is a really complicated situation, though. You can't expect a fully detailed plan with this, but I do wish he would get more into the details, but I think she's wrong to bash him on the prescription drugs. Like, that is a huge portion of the issue. Like, prescription drugs could drop the cost of a lot of things because they can prevent needing surgeries and different things like that. But when they're extremely expensive, people can't get them. And when people can't get them, bigger problems happen. So not only do they prevent bigger problems, but they cost relatively little to produce. So we should be able to get them down, because right now prescription drug companies are just inflating the cost so much. We're not just talking a couple 100% necessarily. Some of these things are like thousands of %. I actually take a medication that is, the name brand is like, I would say it's probably like 20 times more expensive than the generic, and it's basically the same thing. It might even be more than that. The disparity might be, actually, I think, yeah, because it's like $500 a month for the name brand, and it's like under 100, well under 100. It was like, I don't know, I could get it for like 50 or something. So I guess that's, I don't know, it's like 10 times, I think, more expensive for the name brand than the generic. And it's like, that's just ridiculous. It's the same thing. That's 1,000% difference. It's hard to know exactly because, insurance. I'm trying to remember the uninsured costs rather than the insured costs, because most of that will be paid by insurance. But yeah, I don't think he's winning people over, because the spoiler worry, the lack of details, like, he's going for the centrists, which are kind of the silent majority people who aren't interested in politics except for when it's time to vote, because they're living their daily life. But they're pragmatic people. They want real, details on how you're going to go about what you want to accomplish. They don't want a Green New Deal that's like completely unrealistic and just has, a single buzzword or buzz phrase, and when people actually look at it, it's half of it's not even about the environment. It's about like racial rights, gender rights. The people in the center don't want that kind of stuff, and he is kind of on the verge of that, where he's identifying problems, but he's not going into detail about really anything. And then he undercuts his own accomplishments constantly. I don't know why he's doing that.
All right, welcome back to CNN's Live Town Hall with former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz. Back to our audience questions. Let me bring in Republican voter Kevin McMacken, a realtor here in Houston. Hi.
Mr. Schultz, you've expressed that you're in favor of taking guns of war out of American people's neighborhoods. Assuming that you're referring to assault-style weapons, can you explain your motivation with this initiative, considering that less than 4% of firearm murders, according to FBI statistics, are caused by rifles and other similar weapons? And how is removing assault-style weapons going to benefit the greater good of the country?
Thank you for the question. I know this is a very sensitive issue around the country, and certainly in Texas. I said earlier, I want to talk about what I believe in, what's in my heart, and what's true for me. So first and foremost, I respect and I honor the Second Amendment. And I would do nothing if I was president to in any way approach that in a way that would be dilutive to that amendment, the right to bear arms. I understand it, I respect it. When I read a story about teenagers in America across the country in which their number one fear every single day going to school is that there's going to be a school shooting, it breaks my heart.
That sounds like bullshit.
We've had a lot of violence in America, and it's linked to lots of issues, mental health issues, as well as what I characterized as weapons of war. I think we can agree to disagree on this issue, but what I believe is that there should be some sensible approach to removing the kind of weapons that have no place in common society and pose a threat to those teenagers who every day are in fear of a shooting. Now, I'm not taking an isolated situation and bringing it all to one issue, but I think we can have more balance and more sensibility around this issue while respecting and honoring the Second Amendment. I have a hard time understanding why people need to carry an AR-15 around in the streets of where they live. It's hard for me to understand that. I respect, without question,
how about people go
the
hunting
issue of
with
sportsmen,
them?
of hunting, and all the things that go with gun ownership. But I think anyone who has a criminal record, anyone who has a mental health problem, that there needs to be a lot more jurisdiction.
AR-15 is just a style. There's nothing special
and I think
about
we should take a look at this. Now, the far right, once again, doesn't want to do anything on this issue, and the far left wants to do everything possible to remove guns completely. I am in the middle. I'm a centrist, and I think there's a sensible approach to this. Also, going back to immigration, going back to health care, the majority of Americans want to see a sensible solution to this issue. And those are the people that I'm listening to, and I believe
we already have these solutions, background checks.
Thank you for your question, and let's get to our next question in the audience. This comes from Independent, Barrick Chowdhury. What's your question tonight?
If you're felon.
Mr. Schultz, you are known for pioneering Starbucks' partnership with Arizona State, which allows Starbucks employees working more than 20 hours a week to qualify for free tuition through ASU's online courses. As a student, my question is, how would you make higher education more affordable at a time when most graduates leave college with considerable debt and the cost of tuition is growing much faster than we can keep up with?
I am so proud of the fact that Starbucks was the first company in America to offer free college tuition to every employee in a partnership with ASU. Now, your question is so critically important to the situation right now. And once again, this is a problem that should be able to be solved. We have over $1 trillion of debt on the backs of students. But the issue at hand is that there hasn't been any accountability on the part of universities and colleges for completion. And what I would say is that if a college is not completing, if students are not graduating from their college, those colleges should not get federal aid from the government. And we should look at
That's a horrible idea.
For bringing those kids back into college and figuring out a way to delay the payments so the burden of responsibility is still there, but they can live a life in which they're not burdened every day by the $1 trillion plus, which is greater than credit card debt on the backs of students today. But we have to be a country that invests in education at K through 12 through innovation and through practices that are not in place today. And we have to do everything possible to hold universities and colleges accountable for graduation, which they are not today.
What about building on what you did at Starbucks with ASU? My question to you is, do you believe that there is an onus on American corporations to help fund higher education for their employees? Is there a moral responsibility? And also, is that the future of higher education in this country, to have more go online and more be funded by corporations? Do you think that's...
Well, I think I've said for the last couple of years that I think the moral obligation for corporations in America is the rules of engagement have changed, and we need to do more for our employees and for our communities. And there's no reason why the program at Starbucks can't scale to other companies, because it's a unique partnership between Starbucks, ASU, and the United States government through Pell Grants. It's a scalable program. So yes, the short answer...
Even for companies without the margins at Starbucks employees?
Yes, it's possible. Yes.
Okay. Our next question comes from Madeline. She is an independent, Madeline Monroe, a PhD candidate.
Company
Bravo
do that?
to you. At Rice University. What's your question?
Hi, Mr. Schultz. If you were to select a single factor that most aptly reflects the overall success of the country, what would it be? A thriving economy, a healthy population, or something else?
I would say it's access to opportunity. Is that we're living at a very fragile time right now where so many American families feel as if they have lost confidence and trust in the promise of the country. And I know in my heart that we are better than this right now, that this is a moment in time that we can fix, that we cannot allow American families across the country to feel as if the American dream is not accessible.
That was a really tough question.
So I think it's opportunity, as well as what I said earlier, and that is returning the power of the government back to the people, for the people, of the people.
And I think he answered
This
it
is
well
something
with
so critically
opportunity.
important. The government is not representing the people as the way we should be represented. And I think it's the issue
Opportunity
here is
leads to everything
opportunity
else.
and access for everyone.
Let's go to our next question. Paul Bellin joins us. He is a Democrat who works in the energy industry. What's your question tonight?
Mr. Schultz, if you were to be elected, what would be the very first thing you did on day one of your term, and why?
Well, first off, again, I'm 3 weeks in.
Dumb
but
question.
I think I'm so concerned about our standing in the world and how President Trump has fractured our relationships with our allies.
Apology to
that
her.
One of the first things I would do is I would be on the phone with every world leader that no longer feels that America is standing with them, and make sure they understand that they can trust the person in the Oval Office.
He sounds a
and
little
have
naive.
confidence that we will stand by them. And you know, this speaks to something that the president
They're
did
going
in
to
the
take
last,
advantage of us.
couple of months with regard
Under
to
him.
Syria. Do I have time for that or not?
Please.
Okay, I mean, I disagree completely with how President Trump acted in unilaterally deciding that we were going to pull out of Syria for a whole host of reasons. The first is he did not inform any of our allies. The second is the President of the United States has a moral responsibility to listen to the intelligence community and his military advisors. He did not do that.
He listened. He
And not only did he
disagreed.
not do that, but he completely obliterated
He's the leader of the
respect
military.
of those people and left Syria. In leaving Syria, announcing that he's leaving Syria, the result is we now have Russia moving into Syria with Iran.
They were already
and Russia
there.
now has a stranglehold on the Middle East that is going to affect that region for many years to come. We had a moral obligation to stay in Syria, to make sure ISIS does not get stronger, to protect the Kurds who were fighting right next to us, and all of that was
That's
gone
why Saudi
because
Arabia,
President
Israel,
Trump woke up one day
UN
and decided
sent
we were leaving
troops
Syria.
in there.
The country cannot function by these kinds of hyperbolic decisions. We need a thoughtful, disciplined strategy in all the things we're doing, and it goes back to thoughtful servant leadership and recognizing the role and responsibility of the commander-in-chief.
I think this is really
and
going
one of the roles
downhill.
and responsibility of the commander-in-chief is restraint, is demonstrating the humility of restraint.
Trump stayed out of
George
wars.
Schultz, thank you.
Yeah.
Now he's going to be going
Thank
into
all
Venezuela,
of you very
but
much for being with us tonight.
overall he's stayed out of
Thank you as
wars.
well to the Hobby Center for the Performing Arts and our audience here in Texas for their very thoughtful questions. Be sure to tune in on Monday for a Democratic
Okay.
presidential town hall.
So, you know, I'm going to go back to this, show you guys some of this, some of these important dates. So we'll see the Iowa caucus. If you guys aren't quite sure what it means to be a caucus or a primary, basically a caucus takes a lot more time and a lot fewer people show up, and then that's where they'll go and like separate people, you know, the candidates, and then like people choose which candidate they want, and then there's a realignment, and if you're not in the top, then you as a candidate can throw your people at other candidates, and you get alliances, and it's really weird. So if you can set up the right alliances and become a strong enough candidate, then you could kind of be number 3, say the number 3 candidate, and like steal the delegates, because you can build alliances from others that will give you enough people to overtake the top 2. So Iowa, they've made some slight changes to increase participation, but you know, that's where it all kicks off. And then the New Hampshire primary, some people go with some candidates go with the strategy of not going to Iowa at all, or not spending much time there, and they just spend all their time and money in New Hampshire, and then after Iowa they try to win New Hampshire, and that can operate as a springboard. So you know, how candidates do in Iowa and New Hampshire will really show you a good springboard. Now, people can springboard off in Nevada. I think Nevada might be moved up this year, but Nevada and South Carolina, but it's a little more rare. But if I remember right, Trump got a big springboard from South Carolina, but then Super Tuesday comes, and if you haven't won any of these or gotten a bunch of delegates by Super Tuesday, you're pretty much out of it. Because then people start seeing you as a not viable candidate. Even if there's still technically plenty of delegates to be had, but you just won't gain traction after that. We do have, I want to go through the candidates, and I covered all of these candidates up here, except these bottom ones, but we have Cory Booker, Pete Buttigieg. A lot of people don't know him. He hasn't officially announced, but he's got an exploratory committee where he's a gay mayor, and he's actually very down to earth. Uses a lot of language that the average person would use. Kind of interesting, but has no real shot to win. He would be going out there just to get the name recognition for the future. Julian Castro, U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under Obama. Castro, the name is going to hurt him a lot. Not a big fan of his logo, but he can speak professionally, and he will get he can get the attention of minorities, being a minority himself, but with so many minorities, I think that's going to be mitigated. Plus, he's a man, which, right now the Democratic Party is really pro-woman, so I think he's going to struggle. John Delaney, I'm pretty sure he's run in the past, never caught on. He's like a construction entrepreneur. Doesn't really have a chance. Tulsi Gabbard, really good candidate. I think her base is just so loyal, and she's a strong progressive. Has been in the military. She's very she's got her own mind. She doesn't just go with the party, and she's a very unique candidate. So I think she can take the torch from Bernie, and she has to hope that Bernie doesn't run and try to get Bernie's endorsement. Because if Bernie runs, I think they can really harm each other. Because they're different enough that a lot of people will want to go towards Tulsi and away from Bernie, and then a lot of people will want to stick with Bernie since he had his success. So Kristen Gillibrand, she's like crazy, batshit insane feminist. She hasn't announced yet. She's just got an exploratory committee, but yeah, I don't really think she has a chance to win. Kamala Harris, she was a prosecutor and then senator. I mentioned she was lying about listening to like Tupac and stuff. There's been questions about her blackness because she's actually Jamaican and Indian. And so she's not actually, she's not, the Jamaican is black, I guess, kind of, but it's not like that sub-Saharan African or anything like that. So there are questions about how, about her blackness, I guess. Obama faced that too, and she's far less black than Obama, so. And then she's married to a white man. That doesn't go over well. And that actually has been a problem so far. But she put a lot of black people and other minorities behind bars as a prosecutor for drug offenses where, non-violent drug offenses. So I think the more people get to know her, the less people are going to like her. But right now, she's the front runner. Amy Klobuchar, she's the centrist. If she can catch on in the primary, she needs to, and she has been doing this, throwing rhetoric out there to make herself look further left than she is. But if she can get through the primary, she's the biggest threat to Donald Trump, because she's not going to take crap from Trump, but she's not going to make it a big tit-for-tat war like Elizabeth Warren tries to do, who I'll mention later, next. She is really focused on detailed policies, and she's been a U.S. Senator for Minnesota since 2017, and that experience really shows she waited a long time to declare. She's the most recent to declare, and look at her name, it's got green, and that's instead of like so many people do, like red and blue, sometimes black. Tulsi is a little different, but like this Delaney, that's so standard, whereas to add that green is really interesting, and subconsciously is going to make people think she's further left than she is. And she is pushing some environmentalism, which is really popular, with 75% of the country believes in global warming, and 60% are anxious about it. That was in 2015. It's actually raised since then, but I don't know the more recent statistics, so I haven't looked them up, but I do know they've gone up. Then you have Warren. Look at her logo, terrible. Like, it looks black. I think it's black. It's either really, really dark blue or black, and it's just her name underlined. Horrible. But she's from Massachusetts, and that's not going to help her in the generals, because Massachusetts and that New England area is already heavy blue, and she's like a progressive that tries to be liberal, and I don't know, she's tried to go both ways. Like, people expected her to back Bernie Sanders, but then she backed Hillary Clinton, and it's just, she's basically just goes to war with Trump. I don't think that's going to work. People want policy. So if you're not going to put forward policy, people are going to get sick of you. I don't know all of these people, but Andrew Wang, I was watching him. None of these guys likely have a chance to win, but Yang is just like an entrepreneur that he's got a couple of like business issues that he wants to. I think he's trying to force other candidates that in the main parties to, like especially the Democratic Party, to take on business as like a bigger issue. And one thing he wants to do is try to get people away from using the GDP as such a strong indicator for the economy, and focus more on like health and humanity indicators, I'd call them, like mortality rates and things like that, would show how well the society is doing, rather than just how much money we're making. So yeah, here's a bunch of people that I might do a video on these guys soon, where like Joe Biden, Stacey Abrams, Eric Holder. There's some of these other guys too. Terry McAuliffe has run in the past. Beto O'Rourke from Texas, who lost Bernie Sanders. Eric Swalwell is really anti-Trump. I might do a video on some of these guys, or I might just wait for them to come out. So if you're interested in elections, keep an eye out. I did already do a video on these guys, like I said, and women, but I'm planning on doing one, like a video on each one that's more in depth, because one video on all of them to get really in depth is hard. So I was kind of just trying to give people basic understanding of them. So if I do individuals, then I can go even more in depth. So, and I'm planning on doing different videos about how they would possibly, become president. Like, what would their path be, state by state, and things like that. So I've been really accurate in the past predicting. I've actually never been wrong predicting a president. So If you're interested in that stuff, come back. But I'm gonna leave this here. A couple thoughts from what we saw today is I don't think he's got a good enough shot. People want to hear more details, and he's just attacking the right and left too much. And when he calls people far right and far left, he's calling the voters far right and far left. Like, am I far right because I voted for Trump? No, I'm actually left. Like, I consider myself a left-leaning liberal centrist. I should be the perfect person that he should try to win over. But I feel like he's calling me far right because I voted for Trump. And I also voted for Obama twice. So when I voted for Obama twice, was I far left? And Obama was, he says he's running to kind of be the outsider. Well, Obama was an outsider until he wasn't. And then Trump was an outsider. Those candidates are they were the rejection of the status quo, the two-party system. But they're trying to reform from within. And while Obama didn't reform from within, I think Trump actually has done a lot to reform the Republican Party. A lot of people don't like that, but the way he's done it, but the Conservative Party no longer has power under like the Bush conservatives. They've lost all power, not all power, but most of their power. So this will be interesting to see, but I highly doubt he's going to get... what were some of the other issues, too? With, like, the gun control stuff. It's like, he tried to have it both ways. He's going to keep the right to bear arms intact, but then he's going to do things to protect high schoolers. And then, he sounded like he wanted to ban AR-14s. It's like, but that's just a style. That doesn't even have anything to do with the caliber. And like, sure, they'll have like quad rails and stuff, but that people can add like scopes and flashlights and stuff. But so what? I mean, I don't understand the big. It's more like a symbolic gesture to go after one specific type of assault rifle. And like the guy said, there are reasons to have these weapons, self-defense, if we do need to fight the government or something at any time. I mean, there's no plan for that recently, but it's not even individuals like militias and people like, especially militias. Every state has militia. They need access to these kinds of weapons to have a chance at standing up to the government. And there have been situations where protesters have tried standing up to the government, and there may be times, like look at right now what's going on in France. Things can deteriorate quickly. There's martial law in France, and they don't have the weapons needed to stand up to their government. Recently a guy just got his hand blown off. Another guy, as a protester, by the police. Another guy lost his eye. So, look at what happened to the Native Americans. I forgot exactly where it was, but it was in North Dakota. I forgot the name of the city, but they were like being hosed in freezing temperatures and like were at risk for hypothermia. So, don't think that, there's no reason to have assault rifles and things like that. We do need background checks and stuff. We have those in a lot of states. If some states don't want those, I mean, I can see making a background check national, because I don't think it is national right now. Most states do have background checks, but if you do leave it up to the states, it really is up to those states then. I mean, that's the point of having other states. And there are city rules too. It's like, there's a big difference between, I live in Wisconsin. There's a big difference between living in like a big city in New York, like New York, and living in a rural city in Wisconsin. So it makes sense to have different gun laws in New York, than the rural areas of Wisconsin. We don't need these one-size-fits-all. In Wisconsin, we don't have a problem with these shootings. So why should our guns be taken away? And most shootings are from pistols. If you want to take a gun away to protect people, the number one gun you could ban is pistols. I'm not advocating for that, but I don't think he showed a great understanding of a couple of the issues. He didn't know what tax rate to put people at. He didn't even explain a system. He didn't explain tiers or anything like that. He didn't explain how we would change the veteran affairs system. He just or Veterans Administration, excuse me. He just said, we need change, and I'll listen to people smarter than me. Okay, so you're gonna listen to people smarter than you, and your business experience isn't a qualification for becoming president. So why should we vote for you? So some of his stances actually weren't that bad, but I feel like he just did a horrible job overall. The more he talked, the further it went. Like, I was willing to give him a pass early on some of the stuff where he wasn't going into detail, but some of the questions he was asked 3 or 4 times, and he just didn't have answers. And that can change as time goes on, but and really, I think because the Democrats are so anti-Trump, I don't think that he's going to get a lot of Democratic support. And a lot of his stances seemed left-leaning to me, like left-centrist. So I don't think he would have to have a different stance on gun control, in my opinion, to win over the people on the right. So I think he's kind of close to being able to tap into winning people over on both sides, but the combination isn't quite right, and he's going to lose everybody. He could try to focus on the Midwest or something, but I don't think he's going to have success. And how much money is he willing to put into campaigning? Because if he doesn't put big money in, he's not going to win. So, but given that Iowa's first, which, remember, he's an independent, so he's not for the Democratic primary. So given the Democratic primary is first, Iowa's first for the Democratic primary, it'll be interesting. Someone like Amy Klobuchar has a real shot because she's not the number one candidate, and she's really popular in the Midwest. She's never lost an election, and she's won a lot of elections by double digits. So she's got a real shot to win a place like Iowa and springboard, and she should do fairly well in debates as long as she's loud enough. She really has to assert herself. But I'm wondering, like, is Kamala Harris gonna play as well, being from California, or are they gonna be skeptical of her in Iowa? So we'll see what happens, but I'll let you guys get going. I hope you enjoyed the stream, and keep an eye out for my future videos on my elections. And I also put all my election coverage in the elections folder, so if you just want to see the election stuff, you can look in there. And it's also got my stuff from the 2016 elections, so you can watch the old stuff if you want. I did some really long videos, like 2 hours long, explaining the Electoral College too. If you care about that kind of stuff, those are really informative, and I talk a lot about like the differences in states and like early voting and how that impacts outcomes, and how you can judge what people will do well where. So, alright, talk to you guys later.